Tātou, welcome to our meeting for the wastewater management. If I could, before we start, if we could, Owen, if you could open us with a karakia, please. Do we have any apologies? Any declarations of interest? So we have the minutes from the June meeting. I take those as read. Can I have a mover for those, please? Councillor Sheldrake. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Dowson. We go to action sheet. Do we need to go through those? All on track. All on track. Okay, we'll take those as read. And the governance work plan. Yep. And any leave of absence? No. Acknowledgements and tributes.
Would you mind if I take my opportunity
Yes,
now that I
yes,
spoke to you about?
thank you.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. Also, welcome to everyone in the back of the chambers. I just wanted to talk a little bit today, and I thought I'll just take it now to acknowledge Amber for the wonderful work she's done on this committee, the leadership she has shown, and bringing her intelligence in a fun way and sharing it with all of us. So I just wanted to today, on behalf of council, and I'm sure you share my feelings, to say thank you to Amber officially, and I'll be catching up with her tomorrow, and I'll make sure to convey this to her as well. And I thought while I've got the microphone, I'll just quickly talk to you about process going forward, because there is now a vacancy on this committee. And we, as you're aware, there will be an election coming up middle of November. So there will be a new person elected to council, and then there will be someone appointed to this committee. Usually the mayor appoints, when we form new committees, the mayor appoints people to committees and can also appoint the chair and the deputy chair. But because this is not a new committee, you guys and girls, even though I don't see any girls anymore, have been working together for quite some time. So the process going forward is that Leroy, as the deputy, will chair today, and then as a committee, at your next committee meeting, you will then decide who chairs going forward, who's the chair and the deputy chair. So amongst yourself, that is something you can work out, because this is not a new committee like we usually do after a triennium. So I just wanted to clarify the process, and Mr. Wilson will be in charge of that process, and he will write the papers and guide you through this process. So I just wanted to clarify going forward what will happen. And also I will probably wait until the election to make an appointment to this committee, which might, the election I think is before the next, yeah, so it's all there. So that's all from me. I just wanted to lay out the process. And if you have any issues or questions, please just flick me an email or a phone call and we can chat about that. Thank you. That's me.
Thank you for the clarification. So have we got a presentation from the Kiwa group? or is Owen first? All of you. Yep.
Kia ora koutou, Worship, Nadine, WMC members. Yeah, I'm here just to introduce our speakers from the Kiwa Group, and just like to speak about, also to acknowledge Amber's contribution to the WMC. She was a Kiwa girl before that. We can take the girl out of Kiwa, but maybe she'll think about coming along and joining us with her technical expertise at some stage as well. Yeah, so the Kiwa Group, you have the papers there, the progress we're making. I just want to acknowledge the team. We have Karina Toroa behind us and Ali, and I think maybe zooming in will be David Harware and Keith Katupa from Te Whānau Kai, and Diane Irwin and her brother DJ representing Ngāti Onioni. And also Samuel Lewis is also was part of the representation from Runga Whakaata. So yeah, they are part of the Kiwa Group, and just like to acknowledge the mahi that they are progressing, and it's about dialogue, not debate. So dialogue is in that we understand that others have part of the solution. So even though we're traversing quite tenuous issues, we seem to come through with a very positive outcome and understanding each other's perspectives. And I think we're making a good dialogue between technology and tikanga, especially in what the team are going to be talking about today. So it's just just acknowledge the Kiwa team, and we are also very thankful to be able to provide advice to the WMC. So I shall now pass on to
Tēnā tātou tūatu ki tēnei wā ki te mihi atu ki a koutou, ki te whakawātea te wāhi mō mātou ki te haramai ki konei, te whakaputa i a mātou whakaaro, huri noa te wāhi, ka huri atu ki ngā mate kei rungi a tātou, me pēnei te kōrero ki a rātou mā, haere atu rā, whakangaro atu, ka hoki mai ki a tātou te kanohui ora, tēnā tātou ki ora ana tātou katoa. Just in the provide a bit of context. In the beginning was the Māori, and then came the Māori compass. And as a result, like a ship's compass, it ensured that the ship and the crew get to their destination safely. And to, I suppose to use another analogy is that when you're driving about 100 Ks and your wheel is out of balance, it gets very difficult to steer, and it could cause some incidents along the way. So like a fine wheel balance, if everything's in tune with each other, we find that the journey is a lot more comfortable. And so the Māori compass is part of our dashboard and our reasoning on what I'm about to present. And like the wheel balance is a combination of many things, which is the tikanga, the wairua, the mahinga kai, the habitat, the biodiversity, chemical hazards, biohazards, the richness of our taonga, our abundance of it, and also the health of it and the catchment that we live in. And so, since time immemorial, mankind has in some form has revered the human body, and that sometimes, and especially in stress and tension, this was times of war and plagues have also desecrated the same. Māori has also had their methods of disposal of the body and individual parts, so the disposal of water used in cleaning and the preparation of the body, the tūpāpaku. In the beginning, one needs to return to the genesis of creation to provide a context for the reason and the purpose why certain rites and traditions of disposal of the human body and associated materials are used to prepare and to present them. So in the beginning was the creation, the importance of water and land, or as I might say, the whenua me te wai. Rangi, the Sky Father, was created by the gods of the 11th heaven, and from that space, Papa Tuanuku was created. Both of them became the primeval appearance of our world. Papa Tuanuku created the earth herself as the mother of Oneone, or the earth. From Oneone, Tane formed and created Hine Ahu on the Kuruwaka. From there, Hine Ahu gave birth to Hine Titama, who then became Hine Nui Te Po. Maui, the demigod, approached Hine Nui Te Po and requested that man be allowed to die like the moon. But her response was, me mate mate a one, let man die and become like the soil. From earth comes man, and to the earth man returns. The relationship also there was between woman and earth. In Māori philosophy and mythology, just make a pause there at a moment. Somebody once said, how you Māoris talk about Maui fishing up the North Island. He says, God, he says, get real. And the response was, when you can show me the cat that played the fiddle while the cow jumped over the moon, then we'll start taking notice. So I just like to put that in there to put some context when we start talking about the things that we find as important and why certain things need to be done in accordance to our traditions and our way. And so from the earth, many things that happened. We see where Tane went to the uppermost of the heavens and received the 3 kits of knowledge, that he may be able to return back to the earth and create life within it. And so we see the relationship between woman and earth, the Waifero, the Awa Whero, or the red water or red stream, which is, in a physical sense, it's the ability of female to create life. And Māori used the human being, personalized everything from his whole view. He turned them into, he personalized it. And so Papa Tuanuku being earth, mother, the creation of life, and we call the placenta also whenua. And so from the whenua we come, and from the whenua we go back. The Kuruwaka holds the creative abilities and ingredients in the earth so that earth will return. We will return. Here we see our DNA, our memories and experiences return to Papa Tuanuku and become once again part of her. And that comes back to where we're talking about utilizing and disposing of the wastewater that has been used to prepare the bodies for their final burial. The other thing we see ourselves as kaitiaki, or guardians. And from the Kauairunga, and we have a set of principles, and the Kauairunga is the upper jaw knowledge. And the upper jaw knowledge is basically principles that don't shift, don't change, but how you interpret them and how you action them. That is what we call the bottom jaw. That moves around depending, but the principle is always the same. My daughter once said to me, my 2 grandsons went out to do the whittle or the challenge, and they were wearing a uniform close to the martial arts of the East. And my daughter says, Dad, why are they wearing that? I says, because they don't want to show their buttocks to the rest of the world. She said, but tradition. So I turned to her and she was wearing black. And I said, why aren't you wearing your model? Model was just an apron, because married women wore an apron and that was all. And she's like, Dad, that's just been silly. I says, exactly. I says, the principle is the challenge, which is acknowledging the mana and the prestige of your visitors by going out there and also to checking to make sure that the people that are coming in peace. That's the principle. Not what they were wearing, whether it be a Gucci suit or other parts of other clothing of other worlds, but it's actually the principle itself doesn't shift. And so the principles of Papa Tuanuku is dependent on whakapapa, wairua, maramatanga, mauri, mana, and te ao tūroa. And te ao tūroa basically is the big wide world. So in whakapapa, we see the connection between all entities, including Atua. And so Māori was not separated from his environment. He was one with his environment. And therefore, because of his whakapapa, that means just like we have whakapapa, and when our whakapapa come to visit us, we have responsibilities to them, to care for them, to cherish them, and to ensure that while they are with you, that they are well looked after, so that when they do leave, they leave with the saying that my relations are really good people. And so whakapapa connects us all, and we see that the connection is with Tāne. He created Hine Ahuone, and then from her came Hine Titama, and then Hine Nui Te Pō. And then from Hine Nui Te Pō, there's a whole series of whakapapa that also connects us. To Papa Tuanuku, we come from Papa Tuanuku, and there's a number of family members in there. That's Papa Tuanuku gave birth to many, many children. And I suppose, and just Papa in English is like science have a name for everything. Māori had a name for everything. And then the layman has a name for it. So some of Papa Tuanuku's children is sand, loam, clay, rocks, stones, and all those things were born out of Papa Tuanuku. And of course, what we're talking about here is how do we dispose of the mortuary waste? And from the earth you come, and from the earth you go back. And so the filtration process is going through Papa Tuanuku rather than pouring it out into the sea. And so from that Papa Tuanuku came many children. And then from the mixture, when you bring, it's like a coach, when you bring certain skills together, they can produce certain outcomes. And Papa Tuanuku is the same. And so when we filter water, you have a combination of Papa Tuanuku's children, you get the results that you desire. Then we have the Māori, constant need to enhance Māori, and all entities of Papa contain Māori. Tikanga practices and karakia maintain the Māori, and the strong Māori enable the land to flourish. And I think that's what we're all about, is to ensure that while our land flourishes, our people flourish. And mana is an important aspect of our Māori existence. Mana is given by the people, not taken or pronounced on oneself. And I think that's something important that we need to understand too. As people give you mana, you don't give yourself. Then maramatanga, the principle of maramatanga is through the ages, Māori explained their world through pūrākau or personification. That was just enabled a vehicle to pass on knowledge. And I think we can all relate to that in terms of Aesop's fables, and some of the stories that we grew up with taught us principles like the lion and the mouse. And there's a principle in there that even though you're only little, that sometimes you could be useful to a big beast like the lion. And so Māori had the same context, and therefore was able to pass on its knowledge in that. But as a result of that, you had to learn and understand some principles to enable you to understand the codification of those stories. And in those stories are the truths are hidden for those who are perceptive enough, they will see it, and those who don't see it as a story, and a cute little story, and go on their merry way. So in maramatanga, they likened all things to their template, which was Papa Tuanuku. And through the maramatanga, they were able to understand the full meaning of their pūrākau, not only by listening to the stories, but through meditation, contemplation, and observation. And they were able to decode the riddles of life and their beginnings of being. Let those with eyes see, and those with ears hear. And so, and then comes the other principle of Te Ao Tūroa. Not just one aspect of environment, but ki uta ki tai, to the greater world, which means from the shores to the land and to the whole world. Balance needs to be maintained, like the wheel I talked about at the beginning. More of Papa Tuanuku's children was Papa Kura, the red volcanic earth, the minerals, and also the types of granite and types of rocks. All these things were brought together and created the soil which Tāne created in the Ahuone. Rangi toto, lava flowed through blood like the veins of Papatuanuku. So we can see there those relationships to the land. That's why we see Papatuanuku as a template on which was created from. And again, we see the vital connection to man and land. Mā te whenua, me te wahine ka mate te tangata. And the old Māori saying was, for land and for woman, man sheds blood. And so that's the importance of land and also woman. So the whakapapa of water, Rangi Nui married a neiri ko Wainui Aotea, and from that marriage came all the waters. From the water that descends from the heavens, it touches the land and it flows to the valleys and creeks and rivers and then the sea. So like Papatuanuku, Wainui Aotea was also governed by Mauri, Tapu, Mana Taonga, and also Taonga Tuku Iho. So we see those same principles again are governed in the water as well as the principles that govern the land. And water, the importance of water for us is the fact is that from water to the land, then come birth, and then back to the water again, what we call the waiu, which is the milk of the mother's breast. Birthing of the universe, one aspect of the creation was the marriage of Parawhenua Mea and Rakahore, and then came Te Wai. And Parawhenua was, Mea is a water springing up from the earth, and if you go to fairy springs and places like that, the purity of the water comes about because of the layers of Papatuanuku's children that enables the water to be purified before it comes out. Water needed, Papatuanuku needed water because she couldn't move without it. Go and have a look at the hills of Mangatu and you can see how that works. And so I suppose coming to a closing is the relationship between soil, earth, water, and all those things together is important to ensure that our water is protected, preserved, and also flourishes. And there's what we call a ori, which is it's sort of like a lullaby. And the old people used to sing to their children. Rangi and Wainui came together, and from that union came Moana Nui a Kiwa, from which Parawhenua Mea rose up and became Moana Nui and Moana Roa. Then came the lakes, the swamps, followed by the great forest of Tāne. Death was a result, and Rangi turned. This paper carries some of the codification that carries the maramatanga for the creation and connection of the whenua and Te Wai. It takes a whānau together to achieve great things and team effort to complete a task of worth. This cannot be completed without the sacred realm of Rangi, the tapu, and the power of Noa or Papatuanuku or earth. And so that's the context and background in terms of why the Kiwa, I suppose, a group has come up with an idea and a thought to how to get rid of our mortuary waste and not put it into the system or into our rivers or into our sea because of that context. So just quickly, mortuary waste disposal journey. Person dies in hospital, goes to hospital mortuary, the body awaits the undertaker to collect it, goes to the undertaker, body is washed, preparation for embalming, body is returned to the whānau. Where does the water go? The wastewater is collected in a special holding tank, we suggest, and designed for this purpose, and it waits for collection. On collection, the driver then takes it to a place where it is to be disposed of. And in that particular area, we see there are some rituals that are required as a result, which is, to us, it's a health and safety issue. And I think we all understand why health and safety is an important part. But this is also health and safety, our wairua, in terms of the health and well-being of the spirit. And so karakia is required to enable that to happen. And then it's delivered to a place we have suggested the name be Te Ahu o Hine Tātari. Te ahu is the mound, and if we understand ahuone, hine ahuone was the female in which Tane molded it out of the earth and created female. And so we suggest that te ahu or hine tātare, hine is the female, the feminine aspect, and tātare means purifier. And it's based on the context of the Wisconsin mound, where through soil, you do your filtration process through soil. And when a warrior goes to war, he's placed under some very strong tapu. And when he comes home, he's not allowed to enter back into his family life until he goes through the ritual of going from tapu to no. And in order for him to do that, rituals were required to enable the switch from being a warrior of death to a father who provided life. And so the act of a female was the one that removed all the tapu from him to enable him so that he doesn't have to suffer from PTSD and wake up in the middle of the night strangling his wife thinking he's still in battle, which we've seen that happens in life because the lack of debriefing and reconfiguring your thinking. And so he goes from tapu to no. And so we see this concept of the mound as being the same. It's enabling things that are tapu to be removed to enable people to freely exist once again. And that's physically and spiritually and emotionally. And so the whakanoa process begins in that mound. And then once that happens, it goes tapu, and then the water then eventually becomes no. Now, that we see in that there's a number of issues in that which I think is operational more than anything else. But karakia is to neutralize the process of tapu placed on water, vehicle, and the kaimahi, so that all things that were tapu now fall to no. And so that's how, as you've seen, as you go to maraes and in places like that where water is used to sprinkle and cleanse the person so that they can freely go back among people. So the importance of water and whenua, papa tuanuku rangi nui, and then hine ahu one, as I've discussed before. And basically that's where we're at this point in time. I think we can go on for quite a while because Papa Tuanuku had a lot of children. But by mixing the children of Papa correctly and impurities, it restores the earth to a noa. Tapu realm of Rangi Nui and noa the realm of Papa Tuanuku. And so throughout all the things that we talk about, we see that strong context of earth, water, and life. And hence the reason why we, I suppose, have discussed and proposed that mortuary waste disposal is done through this process. That's from a Māori context. So, kāre whakaroro ngā koro I tēnei wā, engari mihi ati kia koutou, te whakarongo ana, ki enei whakaro o tō mātou rōpū nei, e pānei ki te tuku te wai tapu, I runga tōna haerenga ana ka puta mai ko te wai no, no reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Any questions?
Referring to the places where bodies go or the hospital at this stage. Just out of interest, what would happen when someone dies at home and they washed at home, or also some of the older residential care places? Because the proposal to remove the mortuary waste, I assume, is more for the bigger or the most common users of that service, yes, if I can say service. But just out of interest, what happens when someone dies at home and they washed at home?
Well, in most cases, in my experience, that when somebody dies there, the first thing they do is they ring the ambulance and then they take it to the hospital. Then or they would be kept at home overnight and then picked up by the undertakers in the morning, and then taken away.
So the washing usually happens.
Yeah, yes,
at
but there are times when, as we know, when the body dies, a certain function ceased, and there are some accidents that happen. And so therefore, in most cases, it's insurmountable in terms of the amount of, and most of that is taken either there placed in the rubbish, or put, or depending on the family, because some people, some of our people are not educated in our culture and have become very westernized, so it's down the plug. But what we're trying to do is minimize, if a stock, any wholesale thing of human waste going into our sewage system, into our river, or into the sea itself, based on the principles of from the earth we come, to the earth we return.
Thank you. It's really key. So yeah, that's one of our key principles. And one of the key goals is to remove waste from the municipal system. We're also very mindful that there may be other practices, so we're not aiming to discount what other practices might exist, but I think it's in the realms of what the GDC can control, is prohibiting that type of material entering into the municipal system. And then from there, that's our main goal. And it's quite an aspirational goal. We'll be the first to get over the line in the country, maybe. So that's pretty, I think it's like a common community, should be supported from the community wide perspective as well, in addition to the cultural aspects, but just the whole idea of, we can avoid mixing those waste streams.
Can I ask a supplementary question? Thank you. So are these types of discussions, because I know this has come quite some time, we're down the track, is this, now that you say we might be the first, are these discussions also happening in councils around New Zealand already, or are we absolutely there and people are not even taking notice yet?
Well, I like to say that in Tairāwhiti we do things differently, and we do them first. And first to see the sun, first to come up with the best idea. And I think at the end of the day, we hope that if we can achieve this, this may signal to other councils that there is opportunities to do similar things that will look after the modi of the people and of the land and of the water. Because one of the things that we have done, and which has been a first, which is the Modi Compass, that we have accepted the Modi Compass as a tool in our kit to ensure that the Modi of our land, waters and people is maintained. So,
Thank you.
If I add to your,
Yes, Ray.
you're talking about West Continental for Tapaviru Cemetery for the community. We could also put the mound in Urupa. Basically, all the people in Urupa are whānau. So you're putting back the mortuary waste back into the mound, which goes back to the people that it belongs to. That's another way to look at it. So you have mounds all over our rovi, and it won't cost the council anything because the Indigenous people will do their own and do it in their own way, whereas the community ones would have to be under the guidance of this group. Okay.
and we also see this as an opportunity also is to utilise the Wisconsin mound, or the ahu or Pinatata, as an education process for our children in that too. That is not just a mound at the cemetery, but it could be an educational fixture that will enable our children and our people to understand a little bit more on the cultural aspects from the Māori perspective and the whys and wherefores, so that people can, it's like a photograph really is, you know, it's just a photograph of another person until you turn it over and you see the name and you know the name, now you know the person, and now you've got a different view of the photo. It now is not just a picture of somebody, it is, it has meaning, and I think that is one of the opportunities that we could have to utilize that, not only just to dispose of mortuary waste, but also to educate why we do it, and our responsibility as kaitiaki to the land and to our waters.
Councillor Foster.
No. Yeah, thank you for that. Awesome, mate. My question is, you're saying you need to perform a karakia as part of a ritual for the transformation. How often would you need to do that? Because you'll have you know, constant, well, there'll be trucks, I guess, going up there with the water going into the Wisconsin Mound. So would you be performing a karakia every time that truck?
Well, it would be in the same way as how many times you're going on to a marae, to a tangi, the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's just part and parcel of health and safety, just like you check your wheels, you check your tail lights, you have a karakia. And this is a karakia, it can be a karakia non-Christian or Christian or whatever. It's just an act, again, it's part and parcel of, I suppose it's part and parcel of psychology that enables people to get past certain things emotionally and when people have a karakia or have a ritual, that kind of tells all senses everything's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the opportunity, and we see that as a health and safety issue for our waivers, for your spiritual context.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because there's only, because there's only a limited amount. It's about, we worked at about 500 litres a week, so it's probably one truckload a week that would do it. So when the person does that, and then that makes them free from that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Sheldrick.
Thanks, Aaron. Physically, how big is the mound? Physically, how big, what are we talking about?
Well, we're just waiting for the staff to kind of give those calculations, because they're working out the amount of liquid and then how deep the filtration process needs to be, and how regular it will be disposed into will determine the size of the site. I think somebody else has better.
Kia ora, Owen. Thank you for that nice description of the process. Terry, so at the moment, we are monitoring the flows out of the undertakers' facilities, and yeah, we should have good information quite soon on that, and we'll size according to that.
No further discussion on that? Penny, do you want to move?
As part of the gentleman of this older group, as part of this gentleman of this older group, yeah, I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the importance of the work that's been brought before us. The Cuba report is a lot larger than the presentation on the mortuary pieces today. But yes, I'd like to move the recommendation that notes the contents of this report. And I'm happy to, as per clause 19, which is finally a vehicle for integrated research, monitoring, planning, and other projects to improve the Māori and the water quality of Turanganui Kiwa. And I note that a small part of Ian's address was acknowledgement to all the people, and I would like to take the opportunity to acknowledge that in this case, with the Kiwa report, the parts are more important than the sum total. And I think that peppered all the way through your report, who you all are. It's good you're doing some work on our behalf, but who you all are is more important than the work you are achieving, Council. Sure. Thank you.
sorry, committee, through the chair, there are a couple of other papers, presentations to talk to that report on page 27. Would you like to take those now or to jump back through to the agenda and come to them? It's up to you. Take it now.
Take them now.
So if that's right, we'll do that.
You guys, yep.
Jill, can you flip
Sure.
up the next one?
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, I'll just raise a few technical points or just highlight a few for you. The whole process, I think, from a technical perspective is quite simple, but there are some quite specific little bits of information that we really need to make sure that, as Owen says, that all those issues of health and safety are really carefully looked after. Shall I operate the default or can I do it from back here? Yeah. Oh, cool. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, just in relation to the size, I think that LDE, I can't remember exactly, but it was something like 300 to 400 square meters. So it's around 20 by 16, 20 by 20, but that was based on an estimate of flow rates through the sands. But this is basically what the things kind of look like, or that's one aspect of it. And the diagram up the top there is the design for the Taruheru Cemetery. This is a draft septic design. So this was LDE's proposal. You see there's a receiving chamber, then there is a holding, a septic tank, and then another holding and pump balancing tank. So where the levels are kind of balanced out. So the even amount, I think it's about 850 litres per day would be discharged into the sand, into the mound itself. And this is kind of basically what it looks like. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this before, this type of, but yeah, and I think you're going to quote it all about the use of the mound in the States, eh? Ray? Yeah, so that is pretty much, it's an engineered mound. The thing with this, the mounds that they use for septic tank waste discharge, and our discharge is a little bit different because what we're wanting to treat isn't so much microbial factors as some of the contaminants that come with the embalming process, possibly, amongst other more spiritual factors. So that's just a brief run through of some of the contaminants, cleaning agents, preservatives, and something I just discovered a couple of days ago, cytotoxins. And I remember one of our members, Keith Katipa, talked about this, and these are things that are used to treat cancers. They're often used as, they're cell-destroying agents. One of my daughter-in-laws is an ICU nurse, and she said they recently had to remove all the body fluids, and they're actually exported any material from a person that's getting treated with these chemicals is actually sent to Australia to be incinerated. They wear full PPE when they're handling them. So luckily, those things are handled really carefully on site at the hospital or wherever the treatment's taking place. Yeah, but it was something that I'd actually never been aware of. Some of the contaminants are quite volatile, as you imagine, the cleaning agents and the alcohols. which is kind of a good thing in terms of treatment because often those volatile materials can be broken down easier. Yeah, it's quite specific. This is one of the actual materials that are used at Evans. Mound substrates, because we want to be treating some of the chemicals rather than the microbial elements, bacteria and viruses, we've been discussing the use of a highly microbial soil. So that's a soil rich, say like a really high quality aerated loam rather than a sand or river aggregate. So that's something we'll probably have a little trial about. But normally the mound has a river aggregate and then a fine sand. And the sand actually is a really good filter for sure. And mini mounds for individual urtipa. So that's another little design component. Planting, we discussed again, the mounds aren't often planted, but we figured that planting could be quite a good thing from a range of perspectives. So basically that's a series of plants with shallow roots, and maybe we could look at some cutty grasses to discourage people going onto the site, toi and stuff. But then going down more to Manukau and say Tingahiri, some of maybe cabbage trees at the very base of the mound on the edges away from where it could interfere with the discharge field itself. Sorry about this cluttered little design, but that's kind of a brief overview of where we are. There is a minimum. Normally, as far as I understand, the water table is about 1.9 meters below the surface. But at times, after very heavy rain, it can reach up to 500 meters, 500 mils, half a meter. So yeah, I've suggested a couple of monitoring points where we can actually measure the breakdown of the materials. But historically, from the information that's available, is that most of the chemicals that are in the waste stream are actually broken down quite quickly. And I think, I'm not sure if our mate is here, but yeah, CPS have just had the first few results back. And the phenols, which are used for cleaning agents, I don't remember if any of you remember the old coal tar soap, but yeah, phenols are used as a main cleaning agent, and the levels that are coming out of Evans are within what drinking water standard levels are for phenols. So that's a really promising look. I guess that's pretty much, the substrate is something we'll work on. And the monitoring, yeah, so the monitoring is quite important, but I think it's not a major, I don't think it's a major issue to be dealt with. And just as regards the tikanga component, I guess you'll all be aware of the Supreme Court's recent decision out today. Yeah, it probably sits us in quite good stead. And we got a chap, Nick Roscridge, from Massey University, and he reviewed some of our cultural impact assessments, and he said that if we could figure out how to do this properly, yeah, most of the rest of the country, Nick is a professor of Māori studies here too, would be very interested, you know, most other local authorities that he works with, and a member of the EPA. Yeah, so that's just a very brief overview. As Wolf said, we've got a lot more information to get, mainly about the volumes of those contaminants coming out of the funeral homes and mortuaries, and probably a few little bits and pieces that are coming around. So yeah, kia ora everyone, thank you. Any questions?
Just to cover on what Murray asked me, was that the Wisconsin Mound is an Indigenous Red Indian system, but we've got to appreciate that that was years and years and years ago. What Murray presented today was we're putting in mechanical mechanisms to help put the mortuary waste back to Papatūnuku. So I wanted Murray to finish his kōrero before I stepped in with that, but you finished? Are there any more speakers? Oh, it's me.
Just you,
Okay. Kia ora. How you hits? Good. Rangatira mā, e kui mā. Tēnā kōrua. Te whare nui e tēnei, tēnā koe. O te atua, tēnā koe. Manaki tia tēnei hui, a whina tia e roto e mātou mahi. O Lord, welcome. Bless this meeting for the work we all do. Amen. This is new. Ko Ranganui is our Sky Father is his name. Ko Papatūnuku, our Earth Mother, is her name. Ko Te Ao, the world is their iwi. Ko Aotearoa is their mountain. Ko Moana Nui Akiwa are their waterways on, in, over and around them. That's my interpretation of a pepeha for those two people, Ranganui and Papatūnuku. So Tangamahake is my tribe, Maungahomi is my mountain, Waipawa is my river, Ray Farmer is my name. That's simplifying. This paper I'm presenting is a historical epilogue from our past for our future. As one of three speakers from the Kiwa group, I'm privileged to present this paper with legal, ethical, spiritual, cultural reasons for removing mortuary fluids from our sewage system. In the beginning, from our past, the 24th of May, 1854, Parliament was formed, and from then till now, its members legislated laws and regulations for all of Aotearoa to control how wastewater was used, giving local councils the power to formulate their own systems for use and disposal. But in making these rules, our learned Māori and European politicians, lawyers, court judges, health authorities did not protect one of Māori's most precious tonga of mortuary fluids that were used to wash down deceased persons should not have been mixed in with the sewage reticulation system, either from hospitals, funeral homes, as it had the analogy of flushing our souls down the toilet. It was the foresight of Bill Pōtahu Tahu Ruru, deceased but never forgotten. Rest in peace, e hoa, a trusted kaumātua, kaitiaki, and a valued kaiako, who stated that mortuary fluids must be removed from the sewage system. And this has brought the Kiwa and GDC groups together to use their cultural beliefs, expert knowledge, and understanding to eliminate this abhorrent practice of disrespect to our loved ones. These two groups have this valuable opportunity to discuss this diverse subject, and both realise the enormity that prior to this, there has never been any discussions with anybody or each other or with the entire community, either in the past or now. And there is an acceptable solution to remove our mortuary fluids from the system through a simple, low-cost special depository mound of earth with other mechanisms that will be at the receiving area within the Taruhira Cemetery that would reflect a significant and special place of worship, respect, dignity, safety, and comfort for the bereaved families. Maoris would be able to use this earthen mound system in their whānau urupā as most are family members sensitive to whanaungatanga, unlike a community cemetery. So with the terms of reference, the purpose of the Kiwa Group is to provide expert cultural and technical advice as directed by the Wastewater Committee or Management Committee to support the development of a wastewater management in Gisborne and not to provide governance advice and with no decision-making powers. And contributions to this report do not suggest or imply any support or endorsement of any other Gisborne District Council initiatives or processes, including legal processes, and not detract from the prejudice of any other engagement or legal processes that may have been, are, or will be underway in the future. The Kiwa Group's work will in no matter impact on anyone's ability to be involved in the formal consent process once that has started. And the GDC will be following all statutory acknowledgement and consent notification requirements. Also, there will be further opportunities for tangata whenua input. On a personal note, of congratulations to all the groups. Considerations to present the simple solution of applying the Gisborne District Council trade waste bylaw for the removal of mortuary fluids from our sewage system, so that the Wastewater Management Committee can restore the tapu tunoa, being paramount as we have humiliated our tūpapaku and papatūnuku enough. So our sincere thanks to you, the responsible members of the Wastewater Management Committee, for allowing this very important discussion to be heard, and through your forthcoming deliberations, may Te Taira Whiti Rohi set the record straight for all of Māoridom and the wider New Zealand community, where the District Council Trade Waste Bylaw as the simple answer to build this low-cost earthen mound for the mortuary fluids to reunite with their deceased persons, giving the deceased family members their self-esteem to flourish again in harmony forever. The Kiwa and GDC groups will support the Wastewater Management Committee when they present this recommendation for approval to erect this culturally dignified, respectful, spiritual and sacred facility to a full council meeting in the near future. Lastly, thank you all for giving this special topic credence that was missed by our tupunas from our past, that will give back our mana and the chance to stand proudly on our tūranga wāwai, the footprints of our tupuna, feeling their aura and presence around us, knowing all is well spiritually for our future. An acronym for Kiwa is: K is for knowledge, I is for integrity, W is for wisdom, A is for action. And the acronym for GDC is G for governance, D for duty, C for community. This is my tūranga waiwai. Across the river stands my great-great-grandfather's monument. He was a member of parliament, and his name is Wipiri. Thank you, and ka huri.
Kia ora. Thank you, the Kiwa Group, for that presentation. I'm going to suggest that we take a 5-minute break to rehydrate, and then we can reconvene and complete the rest of our meeting. Bye-bye.
What's that? To this?
Kia ora tātou. I've just got a response from Wolfgang, please. Thank you, Wolf.
Kia ora, through the chair. Yes, I just want to end off that those three presentations. So, Ray, if you can just hold on 1 second there. So, just to acknowledge the effort that the team has put into that. And the three speakers that spoke were the leaders of three work streams. So we have created work streams within the Kiwa group that are working on these different aspects, and I just want to acknowledge the work they've put in and thank them for that, and thank them for their presentations. So thank you.
So if I can draw us back to our agenda, we've got some reports. So we've got a draft governance work plan. If we look to page 12 in our minutes, our papers.
So just if I can speak to the draft governance work plan, you'll see that a lot of the things that we have coming up, particularly for December, are very operational. And these are the ones for the committee around the construction of the wastewater treatment plant upgrade and around how we track the consent as that moves forward as a committee, but then also the design and build of that plant. So going forward, as requested by this committee, you'll be getting some more detailed things around how the plant is tracking and tracking some of the detail of what is coming forward. The design, the delivery, don't worry, we're not going to drown you in operational detail of which nuts going where and which bolts going onto what part, given it's a governance table, but we'll be bringing you to show you the progress towards the consents and towards our continuing build of that plant and those things going forward. And we'll be giving you an update of that later on in this meeting to show you where you are, but just noting that there will be some of those things going forward, as we know that that is something you'll be wanting to see more of as that trial progresses. The plant progresses.
Do we get it, John? Oh,
Thank you. I'm happy to move paper, and through the chair, just wanted to ask in the next meeting, there's an alternative use and disposal update. It seems like we haven't done a lot of strategy work in this forum around alternative use and disposal and what direction we think that needs to progress. For example, does this, we've already heard this morning that we are progressing potentially the first nationally and potentially the first globally in this mortuary waste space. Do we need to be pioneering things like New Zealand standard for recycled water, and what position do we need to take in the leadership space on alternative use and disposal? And I think that's worth us discussing in terms of the strategy for that.
Through you, Chair, may I suggest, Councillor Dowsing, if we hold a workshop at the next one around where we are, the options going forward at the next committee, is that what you're, so having more of a discussion forum for that workshop type thing as a committee for the AUD options and refining where we're going? We will know for certain our funding, what we have available and those things, so happy to do that.
Yes, it's that foundational stuff that we've, I think seeking funding to achieve projects is a task we need to do, but what projects we're going to try to achieve is what we want to understand.
yep, thank you. So I've got a move by Councillor Dowsing.
I'll second, Chair.
Second by,
Question, Mr. Chair.
yes.
So we've got the annual report due at our next week. So noting we've got a new chair in the role, how's that going to pan out?
Sorry, in what regard, Ron? So the annual report will come as per the date. Are you talking about having the chair will be appointed at the first paper at that meeting to then carry that forward to be able to accept it
Yeah, my question really is more around how Leroy can participate in the report itself as the chair of this committee.
So through you, Chair, we present that report as staff. The Chair is more than able to discuss, question, or ask us about the delivery of that report and what we've done to date as part of that. So it's our report. The Chair's still free to comment or vote as to how that goes through. Sorry if I'm missing the question.
I think that's given me the process, but what I'd like to see though is a bit more participation from our chair around the construct of that report.
Oh, sorry, yes. Happy to work with the Chair around how that report comes through as part of our normal practice until that Chair is the Deputy. He's the interim Chair up until the next meeting where confirmation or whatever you decide to do as a committee. So happy to progress that as part of it. Sorry.
Yes, Chair, just the opportunity from somebody from governance to have a heads up before it comes to this table. Thank you.
Happy to take that as an action and we'll work offline with that.
Okay. Who's the next one? Drainwise. We've got a Drainwise presentation. Who's delivering that? Wolf. Okay.
Just while that presentation's coming up for the Drainwise committee, Drainwise Progress, this is around where we're progressing, what we've been doing to date, and keeping you aware of what's been happening. And there's been quite a few things, so I'll hand over to Wolf.
Thank you, David, and through the chair. I'm not presenting on the entire paper that's been given to you in your documents. I'll just be touching on some aspects. But I thought I'd take this opportunity, first of all, just to talk about the recent Stormwater conference we had in August, and we presented a paper on the Maori compass there. We've spoken about that quite a lot today. And Ian and I presented that, and it was really well received, and a lot of interest around the country on that. So just to let you know about that. And then at the same conference, we presented, I presented with Neville West on inflow infiltration, so that's a Drainwise program, and stormwater aspects of that. And we can, at the next WMC meeting, provide you with links to those presentations. They're not on the web yet, but they will be. So that's some good information to listen to. So what I thought I'd do today is just to talk about what we have found since we had the recent overflows. We had overflows in end of May, June, and then in July, which was obviously concerning for staff because we're working very hard to try and reduce them. And we had a number of overflows, so we undertook a lot of investigation, especially the operations team. They really went out and did smoke testing, looking in manholes and so on, CCTV inspections to try and find out how this volume of water is getting into our system. So I'm going to rattle through these and then I'll show you some videos. But after the first overflow, we found a very big fatberg. We all know what those are now. In the wastewater pipeline just before Gladstone Road Bridge on the Wainui Road. We have also found a breakage in the Dilator Road sewer main, which was affecting the Turini Seymour area. And we're looking to, I think, may even have fixed that already, or we will be fixing it. It's done. In Rutney Road, we found a broken drinking water lateral. So that's the pipeline that takes water to your private property, discharging at full speed into a private wastewater manhole. In that same private wastewater manhole, we found a stormwater pipe that looks like it was receiving pumped stormwater. So we're not sure what's going on there. We're trying to find that. At 15 Ormond Road, we found a downpipe into a gully trap, so that's not a direct connection. We found another fatberg in Worsley, Wainui. Look, that's quite high up in the catchment, so it's unlikely to affect the overflows, but it's something else we found. We had a catastrophic failure of the pump in Oak Street in the pump station, and having chatted to the wastewater engineer, he said it would have been something large that was put down large and hard that was put down the wastewater network. Some sort of metal object that got into the pump and basically obliterated the pump. There was a blockage found in Ormond Road in the sewer main there, lots of wet wipes and rags. And just recently, just a few days ago, we found a cross connection in Wainui Road. We put smoke down the wastewater system and we found smoke coming out of the stormwater grates on each side of the road. So that could be quite a big find. We don't know what's causing it yet. Don't know, just found it this week. And then we found that wet wipes have become a real problem over COVID. Everyone is using them a lot more, with an estimated 600% increase in the use. And I have a video for that also for you. So Jill, if we can just go through the videos. They're not pretty videos.
PG, all right, Ron?
I won't lie to you, they're not pretty videos. So this here is, could you pause that for a second? Could you pause that, Jill? Anything a chance? So every
What happens to the wet wipes if they eventually get to the sewer treatment plant?
they clog up our screens, cause problems in the network, they clog up pump stations.
Yeah, so they just don't deteriorate, they don't break down.
The
they
biggest issue for us with the wet wipes is they will stop well before the wastewater treatment plant, and that's what causes a fat loop. Primarily is you'll get a wet wipe, it'll get stuck, fat will come down, it'll cool as it hits it, and that's exactly when all the fun starts, because it starts backing up from that and they add really quickly to each other. They'll block our pump stations if they come through. So we have started to change out, and Phil Dodds has done a huge amount of work in our network around putting cutter pumps in and different types of pumps that don't clog as much. We've spent a lot of money on that over this last year and this year. When they do get to the wastewater treatment plant, that's when it becomes fun for Tracy and her team, because they start clogging up the screens. Someone has to go in and clean those out. So it's a real battle we're fighting all the time. And you can see in heavy rain events, the clogging goes up. That 600% is how many more blockages we get over a heavy rain event, because there's just so much more wet wipes going down the system. And it has been something that's spiked ridiculously during lockdown.
So the other side of that is that we've got a promotion out there with the 3 Ps and everything, but do we need to be more specific with just wet wipes and just put a really big educational program out there about wet wipes, do not break down, do not put them in the toilet, and the rubbish bin only?
It's something we're all talking about, is what's our next education campaign, because we thought we'd made it simple enough, but obviously not. So we have to drive it again, but all councils across the world are struggling with this. Londoners, Aucklanders, us, Napier, everybody is, because people keep flushing things that should not be put down. After the last heavy rain event, as Wolf said, we had a system that even baffled Neville. So Neville's been around for a long time and he's never seen the system react the way that it has. We've never seen the volumes of water come through. We diverted a whole lot of Fulton Hogan staff and a whole lot of our staff out during the rain event, and they haven't stopped since to try and find out what went on, because we've never seen the levels of pressure in the network, and we're all baffled by it. So this is the stuff that they're starting to unpick. So that massive fatberg that we found up by Heath Johnson Park there, that was the start of some of the things that we're unpicking that was supercharging that network. So much more water was coming in. But these are issues, we've been past some of these areas. So like that pumped stormwater coming into our wastewater system, somebody has deliberately put a pump on the end of a pipe and chucked it into our wastewater system. So that's a deliberate thing that someone's done. They may not have known what they were doing because they were just draining their section. So now their section drains a lot faster because they're pumping the stormwater off, not really thinking where they were putting it into. So those things are things like the cracked drinking water pipe pouring water into our system. Those are the things that are tipping us over. So we're having to find these things. But huge credit to Mike and his team, because during that last event, they were very much up well past their knees in wastewater, walking through, trying to find out where everything was, and haven't stopped because they're looking to find things like this. But these are the things that we've been talking about for the last couple of years that make really big inroads and drain-wise. These are the ones that we're now able to find because we can start to see the wood for the trees. Previously, we were running around looking at all of those ponding issues or the other things. As we've started the process of elimination, we're starting to find these things that should not be there. You would never look in these places, and now we're starting to find them because we've cleared the other ones off the books.
Just a question, clarity around that. The most recent event you're seeing a behaviour that you've never seen before. Would that not imply that there's been something introduced very recently to create that behaviour?
So we think it's something within the last 9 months. So given the volumes we're seeing now, which is why we're back up in Kaiti, looking in there, and it's something large that's changed around the volume of water coming in. So what we've done is pulled the corridor access request. So if somebody puts something new into our network or there's a new build connection to our roads, we get to go through and we get to approve those. So we've gone back through to have a look over the last 9 months, because that's where the change has come through, to actually look at all of those sites to see what's changed on those to give us the outcomes that we're having now. So something new has absolutely happened. So that's why we're back in these areas looking where we've seen developments or we've seen changes in our levels to figure out what's gone on from there. I can't wait when we find it so we can tell you what it is.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the ultimate outcome is to have less overflows going into our rivers, and it's been really noticeable this winter in particular, the amount of rain that we've had and the quick response from having to put the scours open and another overflow. It's been really frustrating, and for us being involved, being councillors and wanting to see some progress here, and it must be so frustrating for you at the front end. But my question is, we've got resourcing going into it and manpower. Have we got enough? And do we need to resource this more to be able to speed this process up? Because obviously the ultimate outcome is to have less scour outlets opened into the rivers, and we're not really progressing as fast as one would hope, because of these issues. So is it a resource? If we resourced it more, could we speed this up?
Through the chair, there's a law of diminishing returns when it comes to doing what we're doing. We can't be down in the water table right now without costing a huge amount of money to do some of the changes that we need. The other thing as well with DrainWise program, we've hit our budgets every year for spending what we were supposed to spend on private properties. It's a slow process getting that signed off. So the level of work we have now for the investigations, we haven't got a smoking gun that I can come to council or committee and say, here's a $2 million build for me and I will solve DrainWise, because we need to go house by house to do it the way we are and the methodical way that we are doing it. So with DrainWise, it's a 10-year program because it's going to take us that long to absolutely get this knocked, because it's house by house, pipe by pipe, changing those things out. So the investment is heavy in DrainWise and in our infiltration and inflow program. So we're working through the projects and how we can deliver those best, but it's not a lack of resourcing, it's a lack of actually being able to find these connections. By their very nature, they're illegal. So no one's telling us where they are. So it's very much us having to go around and chase those to find those. And saying that, if I can find out a way to ask for more money by council, I'll pretty quickly do it. That's the LTP process.
Well, the other side of that is that the 11 million that we've got for Three Waters, is that been dispersed accordingly as yet, or is it still to be decided where it is going to be sourced?
So the funding for the Three Waters review is coming to council for prioritisation, and it will be around how we look at that investment over Three Waters and over the program that is there. It is also something that needs to be sent to our neighbouring councils around our prioritisation, so that process is in train. We haven't made any recommendations to council or committees yet on that. They're coming late September.
I take it this is more a winter problem than a summer problem. So it highlights in winter. What's the reaction when you find something that's put in wrong and you approach the landowner?
So far we've sought to work together with the homeowners and enable them to make their fixes. It does mean sometimes it might take 2 months as opposed to a month, but so far we've been successful in winning them over and getting them to make the changes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question to Wolfgang, and you may answer it later. I haven't had a chance to get right into the depth of the Kiwa report. Do you have an overall fix of how much septic intrusion is into this stormwater? Is it 15% or is it 60%? Or stormwater is basically clean water and no septic crossovers in the system?
I'd agree with Dave. I wouldn't be able to quantify that. It's not something we're seeing a lot of.
No, sorry, through the chair, we haven't got any evidence of the other way around. It's normally things into stormwater. We're yet to find anything. Wastewater has to be done in a very different way when connections are made and how those things are put through. So there's more of a controlled process around wastewater than there is around stormwater. Next video.
We'll get to the next video. So this here is the latest fatberg that we found. And this is the one up near Heath Johnson Park, Wainui Worsley Road. While it's at the top end of the catchment and it's unlikely to be contributing towards the overflows at the moment, it just shows you the sorts of things that we can find in the system. And that's now on a schedule to be cleaned, or it has been cleaned, I'm not sure. And it's just a horrible video for 4 minutes, whatever. I think we can just go on to the next one. It's all the same. It's a very long lift. This is the stormwater cross connection on Ormond Road. You can see the clear water running into the wastewater system there. That's the stormwater running into from a roof. So we found that recently also. Yeah, just one roof. And Jill, if you start it again quickly, if you wouldn't mind. Start the same one again. You'll see and just leave it there, please. You can see the condition also of that private wastewater lateral. So it's an old clay pipe with a stormwater pipe thrust into it. And so there's the clay pipes, there's the way it's put together, the materials, it's all contributes to the problem. Next video, please. And just pause that there. So this is the private wastewater manhole. So some properties have their own manholes, and might be 2 or 3 private properties connected into one before it gets into our network. So this is the outlet into the public system. So the public system is somewhere this side. Here's a private wastewater lateral coming in, and here's a private wastewater lateral coming in, and over here is that pumped stormwater pipe coming in over here. I don't have a video of it, but I have in your paper, I think you'll see a photo of it. Yep. And as you look at the video, just watch the water coming around the outside of this manhole. That's clear water. That's the drinking water pipe that's broken, that's discharging into here. So if you can press play, please, Jill. So you can see all the water running in there. All that water is drinking water, treated water, running in there, and probably filling up that wastewater pipe by 1/3 to 1/2. So we obviously have now found this and are remedying it. But you know, if you find one of these, there'll be more of these out there, yeah, these sorts of things can choke up our wastewater pipes quite quickly. But it's put onto a register, and now we're working with the homeowners to fix it. And is there another one? Is that it? Okay, so that's all the videos that we've brought, and when we find these, we'll bring those to you also in the future.
Sorry, Chief.
I don't know. If that private one was this big, it'll be bigger than that.
Sorry, Mike, it'd be probably a 250 pipe there, wouldn't it, for those ones to go into? The wastewater pipe that you'd be taking out of there for that manhole, would it be a 250 or 150 out of there?
The main one was a 300. The one from the private manhole to the private network should have been a 200.
Wolfgang, so that's into stormwater.
So that was into the wastewater. That was a wastewater manhole, but it was the stormwater and the drinking water going into the wastewater system. That's the problem.
Okay. It is a problem, but yeah, more water in the wastewater is good, isn't it?
No, it's very bad because then there's no space for the wastewater.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of available space, and yeah, we just can't get the wastewater in and out. And you just can't pass it. So you've got a number of properties that then can't convey their wastewater down the system.
The issue we have is where, say, let's take that one as an example. If that broken drinking water, this is the pipe, it's got 1/3 of its space is taken up by that drinking water that's in there. And then you've got a whole lot of that stormwater taking in another 1/3. You've got 2/3 of the available capacity to take away that wastewater is gone. Those 3 houses are also putting their wastewater in there too, which completely maxes that pipe out and it overflows. So if we've got stormwater coming in and it's taking up the capacity that we need for wastewater, because we can handle our wastewater, as Terry said, this is not a, sorry, Councillor Shadrack said, it's not an issue for us during summer because we don't have all that water coming in because we've got more than enough capacity. And, you know, at our wastewater treatment plant, Tracy's running about 120, 150 litres a second on a normal flow. When we get rain, we can go up 450 plus litres a second just from that rain coming in. So that's rainwater coming in. So we can handle our normal wastewater. We can't handle the extra stuff that's coming in, and that's what causes the overflow.
Any other questions on that? Can I move for that report? Sorry. Yep.
Thank you. So in the report, there's a section on some tables on proposed wastewater overflow consent objectives and targets. Am I on the right report? Maybe not. I might have jumped ahead. That's right. This is, so the report starts page 14 and the tables start page 18. And there's a couple of things that I thought were probably undersold here. For example, the objective for dry weather overflows and frequency. We have dry weather overflows, as I understand it, are unpermissible now. We don't have any ability, whilst we have them still, we shouldn't be. So the objective should be to eliminate dry weather overflows, not to minimise.
If I may answer that one first, it is impossible to stop them because they can occur anywhere in the network, and it's impossible to surveil or maintain the entire network every year. For example, fat blockages build up in sometimes less than a month, and we just can't have that level of oversight of our network.
and I understand that, but dry weather overflows are an unconsented activity for this council. And our objective should not be limited by our ability to monitor fatbergs. Our objective should be set higher than our ability. Otherwise, otherwise we're setting our goals too low. So being an unconsented activity, I'd want to see that as eliminate dry weather overflows to the extent practical, not minimize. To the extent practical, still gives you the...
Through the chair, part of what we're trying to do here is around something that goes into a consent condition that we are able to comply with as close as possible. So by eliminate, we're talking about something that we know nobody can do and we can't do. Minimising to the extent practicable is for us to be able to put something in place that we know we are trying to get rid of. There's an acknowledgement that so as consent holder, we are liable if somebody puts concrete down our pipe, which does happen, and blocks it. We are still ones who are liable should that dry weather overflow reach water, it sits with us. However, for us, it's around how we can minimise that by doing as much as we possibly can, because we know that we can't eliminate it because we're the ones who are liable for third parties' interference or illegal activities on the network, which is why we've said minimise rather than eliminate.
Okay, fine, then that explains it. Thank you.
Any other questions there? Okay, a mover for that. Thank you. AUD? Okay. Page 38, our AUD report.
Sorry, I'm just looking for it, but I see we're unsuccessful in one of our funding attempts, and we were reworking a PGU application. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. Can you just update us on that application? I understand it's the application process is closed for that fund. Is that right?
So we were not successful in getting the PGF funding for it. We were notified 2 weeks ago of that, and because of changing priorities, a smaller bucket for these sorts of projects, it doesn't preclude us from applying in the future if a similar opportunity arises.
We're assuming that the water coming out of the wastewater treatment plant, when completed, will be level 3 as far as for alternative use and disposal. Is that right? I'm just reading through this. It will be in class 3, is it? Industry systems with no potential worker exposure, agricultural use where crops do not come in contact with water. So is that the assumption that we've got? And
through the chair, I'll introduce Drew Williamson, who's the project manager for us on the wastewater treatment plant and helping out with AUD. We'll get him to answer.
Got it. So in New Zealand, there's no class for recycled water. There are people reusing water, but there's no New Zealand-wide standard. Looking at what's overseas, there are a couple of different types and will fall into a class 3 or class C category. Class A being equivalent to portable drinking water, class B slightly less, and then we sit in the class C, which is you can use on, for example, orchards. You could irrigate it onto farmland as long as you're not grazing it directly. If you indirectly grazed it, then that's acceptable. That's a sort of thing.
What's that?
You might grow your grass and then give it a bit of time and then put your cattle on there, or silage or something like that. Yeah.
Because my question is, if we go down the track of a wetland, we need to identify what the use of if it's the first stage that's coming out. Obviously, that's going to be the easiest and the cheapest solution, is if we can utilise the water coming out of the wastewater treatment plant fully. Otherwise, we have to do the wetland to get the water quality to a better stage where that can be used. And I know we've still got to go through all these classes and get acceptance and change that perception. But we still need to know the volumes that we're talking about to be able to do that. I mean, if we can find an industry that would take all of our class, let's call it class 3 or level class C or level 3, then we don't have to worry about the wetland concept, you know. So is there work in this area happening at the moment?
Yeah, so we're developing a project plan at the moment. Like you're saying, you could take water straight out of the treatment plant. The problem is, who wants to take water now? The water continues to come. So the wetland ticks a couple of boxes. It's a storage facility. It further polishes the water, and culturally, it ticks all those boxes. So if we find a use for the water now, straight out of the back of the treatment plant, it doesn't stop us taking that and using it. But we don't think there's a use that's going to take all that water every day of the year.
Yeah, the assumption is that we need to be really thinking seriously about the wetland concept and location and yeah.
I think that we can't get rid of the outfall pipe without the wetland.
Yeah,
it's just not possible.
Yeah, no, fine. Yeah.
Well, it's really good to hear that discussion or thinking's going on, because clearly right out to Muriwai and places like that, I know they'd love to have more water.
Yeah, I think the horticultural industry, in terms of a Class C water, as long as it's getting the growers on board and the distributors and the bodies that govern them on board, you know, the economic benefit to the region is huge if we can get across the line.
Yep.
My other question too, then, so if we're leaders in the Wisconsin mine mound concept and everything, and we can be leaders in this, can we create a universal system and a category like level 1 or 2 or 3 or class 1 and 2 or 3 in New Zealand? Can we lead that conversation here with what we're trying to prove?
I think part of that is around linking in with what's happening with other councils across the country, but then also Crown Research Institutes as well, as to what are we talking about as these discussions change. As we know, we've talked a number of times about Taupo and Rotorua around their land application and some of the ways that they're looking to quantify or categorise the clarity of that water as it's discharged to land, and that will be part of our ongoing discussions as an industry as we start to move towards land-based disposal and looking at applications for that across the country. But it's very much something, as Drew said, it's around us working with industry, both as treaters of that wastewater, but then also for the receivers of that wastewater. And as we know, we've been discussing wastewater and someone taking it for a long time now, and it's around making that the reality of once we have the facts around how clean it is going to be, and then being able to push play on that option, whichever one we're able to get through that AUD program. So we do have that project plan coming to a future meeting, and as Councillor Dowsing's suggested earlier in the meeting today, to talk through that strategy is where it's going to go and how we're going to deliver that up. So be quite keen to discuss it when we have that project plan and we're talking about those options as we can, so that you'll all be informed as to what that's shaping up and looking like at that future meeting.
Any other questions on the alternative use and disposal? Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Yes. Terry and Angus. Thank you. Stage 2 delivery. 62.
Yep.
Update on page 62. No presentation. We'll take the report as read. Can I have a mover and seconder?
When are we starting?
Started. So we have actually started to purchase plant already. So we've placed some orders and paid some rather large deposits for some plant that has now been commissioned overseas. So we've started to enter into the contracts for that. So that is underway. We take possession of the site early next year. And so part of what comes out to market soon is the expressions of interest around suppliers and engaging who is going to be doing the physical works on site for us and what those works packages are going to look like. So they will come out before our next meeting. So be aware you will see those go out as expressions of interest to the market. And we're doing it in a multiple stage approach around how we get our suppliers on board, to identify the right fit for how we're proposing to build this plant going forward, but then also looking at the way that we're going to do it too. So that's going to be happening in the next couple of months for that to go out, and then looking to have early contractor engagement, as we've talked about with this committee, to make sure that we can have them part of our final design process and part of that as it comes through.
No other questions on that? Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Larry. Angus, thank you. Page 74, trade waste compliance update.
So this was a paper that was requested by the committee at our last meeting to talk about how our trade waste suppliers and for what they are putting into our treatment plant. Tracy's here and I'm sure she's more than happy to take any questions on the report just while she's coming up. So this is around our big suppliers, so Indivin, Sedenco, Leaderbrand, Ovation, and how they play nicely or not with Tracy as it goes to what's disposed. Tracy, is there anything you want to add? Sorry.
So in this particular report, we did just a look at what everything was coming in. So that's everything from your major industry, your light industry. So that's sort of like your printing houses and things like that, wash pads and workshops and food premises. So I guess if you're looking at the figures, which is paragraph 4 of that report, it's actually looking pretty good. But the downside, I guess, is that major industry does have a very big effect on our consent, and will have a more of an effect in the future. So obviously there's definitely room to improve there. The food premises actually were the least compliant, but a lot of that is that the turnover in the food premises is quite frequent. And so new people coming in just don't know what they need to know. And so we are developing some new educational material that we're hopefully going to send out with the first run, because nobody reads their consent. It's one of those downsides. I've made them shorter and, you know, made them prettier, but it just doesn't help. So yeah. So that's basically it. We've got some things we want to achieve in the next year. Main one that we have actually achieved is we're just about to appoint, or hopefully appoint, a trade waste officer. So just putting a little bit more resource into that function to make sure that, especially once the upgrade happens, that we are going to be compliant. Any questions?
Bearing in mind, a lot of these industries are seasonal, yeah, and there's seasonal highs and lows, obviously, and I guess the autumn time is the high. Is there enough? Have we got enough monitoring to be able to identify? Because, you know, the trade waste doesn't go through the wastewater treatment plant, but if there is some non-compliance going through there, is it detected at an early enough stage before going to the ocean? And have we got enough staff to be able to monitor it at the peak time when we're needed?
I think with the addition of the extra person, we'll definitely have enough time. As far as monitoring goes, over the last couple of years, what we've asked for the bigger industry, so the ones that don't go through the BTF themselves, and a few others, to put in online monitoring. So it's a instant response. If things start going wrong, they know it quite quickly.
Yeah.
And then part of their consent is that if they know that, then they need to respond within an hour. Plus they need to send their monitoring every week. So if they do start fudging results, we know pretty quickly. So we've got a fairly good handle on that, yeah. And having that online monitoring has really helped us in kind of one, assessing compliance, and also getting in and making sure that people are doing what they're doing, and having those meetings to discuss that if things are not as they should be.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Right.
one of the large parts of Tracy's and the team's role is education with those industries around the effect of what they do and what that has on us. And a lot of this can be, and I'm trying really hard not to single out anyone, some producer, but if they are producing a product and let's say it has a large volume of corn in it, and I'm not picking on anyone, you will have a massive plume that could come through. If they default, we see it very quickly. They know too, and it's very much, they see it on theirs. By the time it gets to us, someone's already called or there's been a conversation as to what happens. So Tracy and the team are working prior to the harvest around, we know you're doing X, what's your plan in place for this year to make you compliant, to make sure that, because if they breach, we breach, and they know that. It's a really very closely related, So for us, it's been working in partnership with them around how we can keep them compliant, and we've already started the discussions around with our new plant and our new limits that will be on the outfall about how we're going to keep each other compliant for those as well. So there's a lot of work that goes on in the background, particularly with the big players around how we know your harvest is coming up. We may have had a couple of issues last year. What are we doing to resolve that? And it starts nicely and then it ends with a big stick. So there's somewhere on that continuum.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know who Dave's talking about, but Sadeko have been on to me with an email twice this week and one phone call. And I guess, Tracy, you need to do what you have to do. But are the major industry users being told that there is some tangata whenua aspect that they may not be complying with? That's the only reason I can see why I've been singled out with as a message.
No,
And I can't see it in your report.
Our message to them is purely about these are the limits you need to meet. So we haven't talked to them about anything other than consent compliance at this stage, their consent and our ocean outfall. There's nothing that we've been talking about for.
No, and I'm happy to elaborate on this a bit further for the committee. So last week we brought all of the industry players into this room to talk about the future consent conditions that they will need to meet with us, and they will struggle, is the very blunt version of a long discussion with them. So as we said, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, under the new consent conditions, the consent conditions that will come into effect when we turn on the plant that we're putting down at Bank Street, they then have to meet the same outfall limits that we do when it comes to the marine outfall for industrial. So they have a quota that they're able to hit for things like enterococci. They need to hit the levels that we hit. For ovation, Indivin, Leaderbrand, all of them will have an issue with their current discharges to get them down to the next level. There's a significant investment required by some, if not all of them, to meet those consent conditions. So that is something that has been a very hot topic for us since we sent a letter about 2 weeks ago, I think it was, Tracy, that we sent it out. Yeah, the latest one around this compliance. We had a very productive meeting with them last week, and as part of that, we are looking at compliance and the different options that could be done collectively with them and us going forward and how those wastes are treated. But they're very early discussions and we're working through what they will look like. But it has been a big change for industry around that. But at no time has tangata whenua requirements been thrown over the table as a stick or anything like that.
Thank you.
I guess just adding on to that as well, it's not really been a surprise for people, but I guess the surprise for them is that we are actually going to make them comply. I'm not sure why that bit was the surprise, but we've been socialising this since prior to this consent, so 2008, 2009. And every year we go through the same thing again, water reduction, make sure you're compliant, there's going to be changes coming up. So yeah, we've got to the crunch time and people are starting to feel the squeeze. And I think that's where they're going. They are contacting not just you, they're definitely trying to go around quite a few people to get the answer they want at the moment.
Just on the 208, I sort of thought there might be a lot more than 208. So are you getting everyone?
Probably not.
No.
Unfortunately, I've been one person. And so again, having that other person coming in, one of their jobs for the next 6 months is literally just going to be going around and going into premises and saying, what do you do? Do you need a consent? Do you need treatment? What is it that we need to get treated? And then start that process. I would suggest there's quite a few more. Yeah, it's not ideal at the moment, but we are working on it, and I'm aware of where the gaps are. It's just trying to fill them at this stage.
Basically doing
Yeah.
cool tracks.
Thank you. So at the beginning, you said that paragraph 4 looked quite good. What is our expectation in terms of percentage of compliance? And is this, and when I read that, does that mean that for 66% of the year they were uncompliant? Oh, sorry, for 44% of the year they were uncompliant? I can't even do maths
So
today.
the way, it's all right. So how I assessed this was I said, any non-compliance in the year means you are non-compliant. So it's not that for 66% of the year, all food premises were non-compliant and it was only a short period of them not. It's just if you're looking at a way to report a trade waste compliance, because we haven't reported this before, how do you report it? So I thought, well, we'll just do a one and done kind of approach that if they've failed once and they've failed for the year, we do revisits, we do go back and talk to them, we do education. So often that one that has been a problem, we change the frequency of the clean out, we get them to upgrade, those sorts of things. So often there's not a second one, but if you're looking at it, yes, it's not a over time, it is just a, did you comply for the whole of the year or not?
Okay, and we've just talked about how it's going to get more stringent, and we haven't performed particularly well in some of those areas, or they haven't performed particularly well in some of those areas. We have an expectation for them to be compliant, obviously. So, you know, we'd like to see all of these at 100%. Goalposts are getting a lot further away now. Where are we going to see this drop to, and how are we going to close those gaps?
So
I don't see how one person is going to change this landscape for us.
I think if I can cut in there, because it's around, there's parts that Tracy and her team do, and then there's the other parts of what we have around supporting these industries. So if I can take major industry as an example, they've had breakages, which has made them non-compliant. They've had a mistake happen, human error, someone's pressed something, which made them non-compliant. Those things we can go back and audit to say, what's the fail safe that then goes in, and we work with them to fix that. When we talk about the increased standards for what's coming in, again, that hits major industry. And part of that is why we are having conversations with them around, this is a collective responsibility for them and for, to be blunt, me, because I'm a consent holder. So around how do we not make each other breach our resource consents going forward, which is why all of us are interested in a collective solution, which means we have something that means we won't breach at the outfall, and it means that they won't be worried about how they feed into it as well. We'll still have controls and measures, but we'll have a backup to them, which is at the moment difficult for industry around some of these things. And not everyone has a Tracy who can sit down and figure out those things backwards and actually find out what's going on and get the solutions and work them through. So it's around how we share our knowledge and resource with them. The additional person who's been approved is around helping them at the front end around how they can make sure they've got the right things in place, so that all we're dealing with are mistakes, accidents, human error, those things, rather than the education, but to get everybody up to the level playing field that we need at the moment. A lot of these new limits only hit the big players. They don't hit the food outlets. The food outlets are dealt with in a different tier. As Tracy said, it's difficult to report this in because we've never done it before. So it is, we'll work on how we can kind of show the different inputs we have across the system, and then the different ways that we deal with them maybe in a future report.
Just that extra person, just the worth of them. One, the education is, it takes a lot of time, and so that'll really help there. The other thing is that I'll still be involved, and you'd be really surprised, even some of the major industry, when you go along, find some non-compliance, charge them for your time, and write it into an invoice that says visit for non-compliance. It actually surprisingly makes a big change. The little guys actually, they're kind of seeing that as a significant charge, but a few $100s, you'd be surprised at how much the industry suddenly go, well, I don't want this in my books. And so, yeah, we do that to them.
Dave, just the, so is there two parts to the consent, what they produced is considered waste, and then there's how they should ameliorate that, and then where that waste goes to, is that a different part of the consent as well?
So through you, Chair, the way that it works is, if I can take Ovation as an example, and there's someone we work closely with, so we don't have issues with Ovation, we work closely with them. They produce a waste that they need to treat on site before they're able to put it into our trade waste line. So they have to get it to a certain standard before it's able to go into there. So they have a discharge that goes into our trade waste, which they need to get up to the level it needs to be. Before we give them a consent to discharge, we look at our consent and say, can we accept that into our waste stream? Because I've got our resource consent that we have to comply with. So they have to comply, and we look at their input, and then we go, well, if they put in X and Sedenco's putting in Y, we're okay because the two levels are different. If they both put in the same thing, then we're going to have a real problem trying to manage that when it gets to us. So we're managing their inputs into our system. So they have different treatment options for depending on which waste is being put in. Some of them are able to put their waste to stormwater because if I take some of the cooling water that comes out of Liederbrand, for example, there's no need for that to go into a trade waste. It's volume we don't need. They're able to cool it and put it into the stormwater system, which works well for both of us. So we try and keep stormwater out or cleaner water that they use out. So we're only looking at what they need to treat for it to come into our plant to see if it needs to be treated again. But we're very much looking at the industrial pipe that doesn't go through the BTF and constantly looking at the levels of what's in there to make sure we're managing our compliance at the outfall and making sure that they're not putting in a waste that's going to tip us over the wrong way or is going to affect the other incoming wastes from other suppliers as well.
The highest non-compliant is the food premises. Do they have a separate trade waste line? That's one question. I've got another one as well.
No, they just go into the domestic line. So we get them to treat. So the domestic ones, particularly the food premises, the key thing that we're trying to achieve there is not necessarily compliance at the BTF. It's literally just making sure that we're not blocking pipes.
Yeah.
So not trying to contribute to those fatbergs.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that was my other question actually. So if they're non-compliant, what is the most common reason for being non-compliant?
Often it's not wanting to get the grease trap or treatment system cleaned out. It's not a huge cost. And so if you think you have to clean out 4 times a year and it costs you $150 a time, that's sort of $600 in a year. I guess people don't see, because they don't get anything out of trade waste. It's not a selling point. People see it as an unnecessary cost, and we're sort of trying to teach them that it's just a cost of business. If they can't afford it, they shouldn't be in business.
Yeah.
$600 for a year.
Cool.
Yeah.
No other questions? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Terry? Oh. Okay, that's all. Any other issues? Thank you.
An issue, and it's absolutely, it does relate to water. Just this pipe that runs under the Olympic pool. How deep is it? You know, is it in good nick? Do you know it's in good nick? What's the story there? I've been asked, so I thought I'll ask today.
So it's our main interceptor. So it is our eastern interceptor that runs underneath the Olympic pool. I won't go into the good or bad idea that it was to put the main interceptor underneath the swimming pool, but it's there now. We've done a condition assessment on it. It's in fine condition. There's no issues with it from our point of view going forward. If anything, we would look to line that pipe, and that's part of the Olympic pool project, is to do the cure in place lining that we do to ensure the longevity of that pipe, given we're about to put a significant facility over the top of it. We're not talking about moving that pipe because just the cost and for everything the back engineering of it, it's not just moving the pipe, there's a whole lot of other things, but the pipe's in fine condition. There's no reason for us to be concerned. It would be meters, not many. I think it's 2 or 3. I think it's 2 or 3 meters, but the pool's going higher. The pool's not going deeper. So yeah, I think it's 2 or 3 meters underneath at that stage, but that's just off the top of my head. I'd have to get a proper answer for you.
Just a random question on that last paper. Is there a Is there an alternative, if we're seeing a lot of non-compliance in a particular area that has high turnover and high education needs in terms of food premises, is there not an alternative mechanism where we centralise the the grease trap collection and do a targeted rate or a rating on food premises?
Tracy, I'll start and you can stop me if I go wrong. Part of the issue around it is there's a lot of different technologies and everybody uses something different on their site depending on, there's approved methods, which Tracy spends a lot of time researching as people come up with new weird and wonderful ways to treat their fats and oils, which is always interesting. However, you can't convey it, you can't move it, it has to be dealt with on the site because it coagulates pretty quickly, unfortunately. Is there anything you want to add to that, Trace?
Just the logistics of it, because if you look at how much water that premises use, you're looking about sort of 5 cubic meters a day for some of them. Some of them are less, but 5 cubic meter a day is sort of your permitted activity. Trying to truck that around when you've got 208, minus the industry, so 180 known premises. It's quite difficult to get that anywhere, and then trying to pipe it anywhere, as we're saying, it just goes fat really fast.
Sorry, that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that if each premises needs a truck to turn up 4 times a year to clean these out, then why not we commission the truck to go to them and clean it out and on charge it to their rates, so that it's so that it does become a direct cost of business, and there's not a turnover issue, and there's not an education issue, but if it's not that simple because there's 10 different trucks and 10 different types of trap, I don't know. So
we have a business in town at the moment who is doing that service. They're the only ones that can, because they're the only ones with a disposal, a way to treat it before it again comes to us. So they sign up a contract with them. So that's part of the stuff we do as part of the consent. We get the consent holder to sign up with a contract with this company, and then we basically just make sure that that is actually happening. So a lot of this is going to be some of the stuff that we're hoping is going to be resolved by our new person. So literally going and tracking, give me your receipt or your report from your grease trap clean outs, condition assessments, things like that. So that's a lot of work that we can do to make sure that they're also the right size for the job. So yeah, we could look at doing it ourselves, but the downside, I guess, is if it's a consideration.
Think about displacing private suppliers, which we don't want to do. So it's around here. It's around, part of it is getting the compliance up with their trade waste consents to make sure they have emptied to do what they're supposed to be doing. So the first step is understanding how we can move that forward better with them, and then it will be looking at, have we got the right amount of tools in the trade waste consent to compel people to make sure that they are complying with it, and that'll be part of that review in future once we understand completely how well it's operating or not.
Yeah, for me, it just feels like we can bypass the conversations and the education and just put and not cut out any private supplier, utilize the private suppliers that already exist and just get the job done. But I don't know.
I guess
I do see things a little simple sometimes.
I guess my concern is that if we start doing work for people, there has been a few times in the past where it's been, well, doesn't council come and do this? I'm not responsible for my compliance because you should have come more often. It starts getting really interesting if you start doing the work for them. So yeah, something to consider though. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
In what aspect? We've got the environmental health team here, so they do the food premises registrations, and so they do a lot of inspections and things like that. We have a close working relationship with them, and as part of that, we often are letting each other know, hey, are you aware that this premise is doing X, Y, or I went and visited the other day and it didn't look that good. You might want to go and have another look. So we don't do joint inspections and stuff because we're obviously looking at very different things when we turn up. But we do inspections for all the premises, so at least once a year. So even the most minor premises will get at least one visit from me a year. And then yes, more if where the environmental health team let us know that there's any issues as well.
Thank you, Tracy. No further discussion, no further issues on our agenda. I'll close our meeting with karakia. Kei noi tātou. Kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ariki, te harahoa te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake. Amen. Thank you all.